Let's talk all about AI in business. It's hosted by Brent Muller. Welcome to the Future Proof Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Future Proof Podcast. I'm your host, Brent Muller, and I'm joined by my guest, Jim Kernan from Luxonis. Jim, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, so Jim, let's jump right in to, and you're the CRO over there at Luxonis, but you have some great stories. You and I talked through a bunch of things on a separate call. First off, just introduce yourself and your background, and then we'll jump into, all about Luxonis.
Yeah. Again, thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to speak a little bit about the company and myself. So, I've been in the technology world for, I guess longer than I'd care to say at this point, but about 15 years. I came over from the banking world previously and, found an early stage education company where I was able to help out with, kind of their basic technology, early level, marketing, very simple tech stack stuff. And had some success there. And that opened up a number of opportunities for me to do consulting with large and small companies, and ultimately found myself in an incubator with Stanley Black & Decker. And out of that incubation came a company where we were using computer vision technology. And unfortunately, that didn't really work out. But that's par for the course in
Part of your journey.
Yeah, exactly. It's part of the journey. But, the really cool thing that came out of that is developed a great relationship with my co-founder, who I basically stalked on the internet to find. And he's a really brilliant computer vision engineer. And he ended up finding or knew some people over at the Luxonis team. And the two of us, after we decided to close the doors with the previous company, joined Luxonis. And I guess the rest is history, as they say. But, now we're facing the problems of how do we scale up the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Jim, just for everybody listening, walk us through Luxonis. And you guys are kind of like the eyes, ears, and brains behind some robotics, but you have all kinds of use cases for your technology. So kind of, walk us through it.
Yeah, I'll start you with kind of this slow, colloquial conversation that I had. Have what I would describe it as is wedding table conversation, right? You have a good relationship with the people around you, and maybe you know them, maybe you don't. But invariably in those conversations, for the people who you don't know, they ask, "What do you do?" And you want to keep it light and not get too into it, especially as our product can be extremely technical. And I always tip it off. I just say, we make eyes for robots, and that invariably sparks an interest for everybody because AI is obviously a huge topic in the world at this point in time, and whether people have seen all of the humanoid robots that are starting to get marketed in the world, it's commonplace within sci-fi, so people are aware of it, and it really brings the physical nature. When you say eyes, right, like eyes for robots, people think about the anatomy of a human and how that relates to it. And really what I'm getting to with the point in our technology is any decision that humans are capable of making with their eyes, which is quite a lot of decisions. 50% of the frontal cortex is designed to process visual information. So it's a huge, part of the way that we perceive the world. Any of that information can be processed by our cameras. And obviously there's training that has to go into it. But as a result of the open platform that we've built on top of our hardware, we have use cases across a number of different industries. Just to throw a few of them out there, just industry level, it's transportation, security, retail, warehousing, agriculture, manufacturing, construction, right? And those are just a few. And, if I get into some of the specifics of it, we have people who've used our cameras for baby monitoring in neonatal care units, up to license plate recognition in parking garages, to collision avoidance in autonomous vehicles, right? Like it really goes across the board. And so one of the coolest things about my job is speaking to all of our customers. And it's just amazing the things that people are trying to do and the problems that people are solving with vision technology. It basically has a nice little VC spin on it, where I'm constantly talking to companies who are doing completely different things, because the core is they need vision as a component of their technology stack. So yeah, I find it really, really fascinating to hear what people are doing with our cameras.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. And they're very small devices, right? I mean, again, they range, right? But yeah.
Range and size, this is one of the cameras that we use. You can see it's handheld size. The baseline on the cameras, like they're stereo depth cameras, so they're designed again kind of similarly anatomically to the human brain or the human eyes, where like there's 7.5 centimeter baseline, which is roughly around like what a human baseline is, to be able to just calculate depth. And if you look at anything on your desk, if I reach out and I grab one of these cameras, the way that I'm able to do it is because of the geometry in my eyes, and I can actually calculate the distance. And so our cameras do that exact same thing. Like they, use the two lenses to calculate the distance within the distance to objects in a given space. And then like the really unique thing about our technology is outside of the stereo depth, because there are a number of companies who operate in the stereo depth space, is we have the ability to do all of the vision processing on our device. And so that's where I get into that, the earlier comment that I said, robot eyes or eyes for robots, you're able to make the decision of like, classifying, is it an animal? Is it like any type of object that the camera is being instructed to from the model to identify, but then being able to process that information on the device and give a kind of meaning to the world is a really valuable thing. And kind of the way that I describe it is like we are the like between like the physical and the digital world, right? So you can process that information, then do whatever it is that you want with the device or with that
I feel like
information that you pull off.
You're extending the internet almost like IoT, but you're in a different way. You're extending the internet into the physical world.
Yeah, it's again just giving machines perception is kind of the way that we like to describe it. And as you mentioned, the eyes, ears, and brains of autonomous and robotic systems. So we're able to take the imagery that is out in the world and use that into some level of process. So just to give an example, of a very standard one, people will use this frequently for defect detection across manufacturing lines. And so we've had a number of different instances from PCBs to consumer goods to fabrics, like you name it. Like all people will ultimately stick our cameras on top, and they'll train, stick our cameras above a manufacturing line. They'll train it on what a defect and what a quality product looks like, and they'll just run their manufacturing line across it, and then they effectively just send a flag back to the system to do whatever it is that they want to do with the defect. Maybe it's pull it off the manufacturing line, maybe it's stop the manufacturing line. But we have use cases with global manufacturers who have noticed significant increases in the efficiency of their lines by being able to address defects before they continue to compound as a problem throughout the system. And again, that's what the nice thing about that is that like in kind of a handheld device, right? This is a single object that you're able to just plug right in. Doesn't require all of the central compute. Effectively, just requires power over Ethernet, which is something that most manufacturing lines are
in stage, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like that's not something that you're going to have a difficulty finding. So it's a simple wire that connects. Not a huge technology stack that has to get deployed just to be able to solve some of these problems.
Really, really, really cool. So when we were talking before, you have like a couple of use cases. So you wanted to just give everyone listening just a couple stories of how it's being implemented in different ways, right? I mean, manufacturing for sure, right? And on assembly lines, but there's some really cool applications that you all have encountered.
Yeah. I mean, it's always like where to begin on this because there are so many of these that are just fascinating. I'd say that one of the things that we are most proud of is the work that people are doing to literally save human lives. And that has, again, ranged from a number of different instances. In a very simple case, I shouldn't say simple case because it's not a very specific case is being used in neonatal care units just to monitor the respiration patterns. Yeah, the respiration patterns of infants. So and just having an impact on that and being able to expand the availability of nurses to not have to monitor all of the babies in a simultaneous fashion, or like you're able to spread out the capability of them monitoring multiple
And then it
different
gives you
infants.
alerts, right? Or gives
Yeah,
the nurse the
exactly.
alerts. And yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Another one of the industries that we are very heavily positioned is in the agricultural space. And there's tons of industrial equipment that's used in the agricultural space. And, there are machines that are, quite I think that the statistic is there's 400,000 people every single year. It might even be higher than that. It might be 400 million. I'll have to get back to you on that statistic, but, they get injured or killed at work every single year. And so, just being able to like trigger kill switches on like those on the industrial equipment within, again, industrial manufacturing, whether that's agriculture, whether that's in a manufacturing plant, is, definitely something that we're proud of. Another instance with that is, we have a number of different sensors, and one of them being like a thermal sensor where people are looking at us as they're harvesting fields to identify humans and animals that might not be visible because they are being occluded by the crops that are,
the crops
taller
or the
than,
height of the crops, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So you have these huge combine harvesters that they're going out and they're obviously just, going about their business, and you wouldn't necessarily know if someone was bent over, or if there was an animal that was running through the field. And obviously, like, that has, the loss of life is a significant one, and loss of productivity is another one. You have to shut that stuff down. That's just one instance in health and human safety. Again, the use cases, people are using us to help with poaching. Like they have, small cameras that are set up in remote spaces where basically the more or less motion sensor cameras, but the motion sensor will trigger a recording, and you can obviously you can't just have a motion sensor like out in the middle of the Sahara. Right? Like you need to, be able to identify what is walking by like that area, what it is. And so our cameras are basically used to identify whether it's people or whether it's animals, and they, prevented, poachers are, used effectively as the front lines of identifying when there are poachers in an area where they're not supposed to be in.
Really cool. I mean, when you start to think about it, you can kind of extrapolate that the applications are endless, right? I mean, from medical and healthcare to agricultural to manufacturing, before we even get into robotics, right? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's really across the board. Like I said, we're very fortunate in that we have, 40 of the global Fortune 500 companies who are looking at us in some capacity, or working with us in some capacity. And really the only industry, out of those top industries where we haven't had like, some type of meaningful traction, is the banking industry. And outside of that, every single of the top companies in the world that you would think of are exploring us in some way, shape, or form, whether, it's retail systems who are monitoring consumer behavior and foot traffic patterns, to, again, like, health and safety is a great one for us, and using us in hospitals to monitor, like, not only the neonatal care facilities, but people who are, like post-op, if they, they're basically drowsy after they've been administered drugs. That, like, one of the most dangerous things for an individual, like post-op, is to get up out of their hospital bed. And so, we have systems that'll monitor if they do, if they're getting up, alert the nurses,
right? Because they're still not lucid, right? And they just,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's nothing nefarious at all. It's just like they've been under drugs, they've been knocked out for a couple of hours, and you get up, the best thing to do isn't to go walk around and explore.
Exactly.
Again, so small things, that, we deal with on a daily basis, are, problems that can, be addressed with our technology and really have a huge impact. And like you said, the applications are really endless with it. It's, if you start to think about like the basics around like what decisions do you make with your eyes on a daily basis,
Right.
there are huge amounts of those things. And so there are a number of different ways where you can improve human lives by, having this type of technology. And again, fascinating for us to be in the position to, to discuss to be discussing those every single day, and being a part of, what is, going to be a really fascinating, coming years, as we move from a place where technology has for more or less been, bytes for a long time, right? Like it's zeros and ones with what we've seen within the internet and all of the software. And we're starting to get to this point where, it's more physical technology that is going to be included in everybody's daily lives. And again, to be the facilitator of that is a really awesome position to be in and experience.
Very exciting, for sure. Very exciting. So as you look down the road, right, over the next 1 to 2 years, what do you see on the horizon? Because you know that this technology is just going to get more and more integrated into everything we do, right? But it is a bit of a disruptor. So how do you see this kind of playing into the marketplace? I mean, the adoption rate is probably really starting to grow anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of this is related to the trajectory of our company, right? It really encapsulates it quite well. So we were originally founded as a company that was looking to solve like a specific problem, which was related to biker safety. And ultimately, what was uncovered by Brandon, our founder, was that there wasn't really a great set of technology to have computer vision in a very small, compact device to be able to do the things that he wanted to do.
Right.
And so he was, more of a tinkerer and a problem solver at that point in time, just like, a creator.
Right.
But in his research, recognized that there was this larger problem of how do you compress like the vision technology into something that is usable, extensible, accessible to the world. And it didn't really exist. In creating that, we actually were, first got our feet underneath us through some Kickstarters and had, record-breaking Kickstarters in our categories multiple times over. But so really through 2019, our founding through 2022, it was all hobbyists who were purchasing our products for us. It was, about 90% of our company was directed by hobbyists, or 90% of the revenue. And that just kind of flipped on its head. And part of this is a result of ChatGPT coming out in late 2022 and really kicking off the AI craze, where you had like a flip in the way that people viewed AI. Like all of a sudden it was a mainstream technology, or at least one that like had to be, thought about strategically for organizations. And you even see corporate executives like having, their compensation packages, influenced by their adoption and implementation of AI. And so, our company, we started out, had this grassroots beginning where, people who are hobbyists are likely the people who are going to be implementing these solutions at their large organizations. Already we're familiar with our product. And then you get stuff that's top down, where you have all of the Fortune 500 companies saying, like, we need to implement an AI strategy into our company for the longevity of it. And so now there's this confluence of we have a decent base underneath, and then stuff getting pushed down from the top saying, we need you guys to look into this. So back to your original question, like, where do you see things going in the next 1 to 2 years? I think that you're going to start to see it in just about every application that you can possibly imagine. It's gonna feel like it's happening overnight, but there are people who have been working on this stuff for years. Now there's R&D departments who have been working on this stuff for years, and again, you'll see it. You already see some of the fingerprints of it in a number of different spaces with all the autonomous systems. If you look around in different environments, you'll see automated, obviously people know what a Roomba is, but every single airport you go in, this technology is all over the place, right? You have robots that are cleaning floors, and you have facial identification. People have, I'm sure that most everyone, the first time in the last year or two when they got onto a flight, when they didn't have to actually flash their ticket or present their ticket, because United has Yeah, exactly. The first time it happened, it was just very, very confusing. But again, there's facial recognition technology. And so all of these places, you'll start to see more and more implementation. We were just at CES in early January, and it was really, really humbling to go into some of the rooms and see these large companies who were using our devices to power their displays and their presentations for what is arguably their most important trade show in the world.
Right.
And because we're under NDA, even though the information is public, I won't say, specifically, but, there was, a large car company that had an interactive display, and, they were doing people identification throughout the entirety of their booth. And you could see up in the corners our 4 cameras that were driving this interactive display. Another industrial manufacturer who had an automated like garbage can, picker upper. I don't even know what you would call the arm, but there's like basically an arm that would extend out of the back of a garbage truck, pick up the can and dump it in. And there's a video of them talking about how that'll save an hour of labor each day for each one of their drivers. So like massive efficiencies. And so
big
As
efficiencies.
and if you think about it in the next couple of years, it will be all of those, like a number of those items where it is just enhancing the way that people do their jobs, making them more efficient at them doing their jobs. So ultimately they're able to do more interesting things. I'd say fundamentally the way to look at robotics and automation, AI, like anything that in the physical space, like what it ultimately will do is allow people to move to work that is more like high value add as opposed to stuff that is more like laborious. And like, I know that oftentimes scares people, but if you look at, if you look at the segments of society where this stuff is in play, like you end up tending to have lower employment, higher wages for organizations or nations that have implemented more technology.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So one of the things that I see, right, and the reason the parallels I'll draw is my other company that I'm the co-founder at is a data company. We had a similar problem at a different scale. But as you know, data, if you have data, it plays in everything. So the challenge that you're facing, right, we had a similar challenge. I'm just curious on how you guys are attacking this, but because you apply to almost everything, right, outside of banking, right, how you're in every industry. As the CRO, what's the biggest challenge of trying to figure out where the growth levers are?
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem that we're facing head on right now. And I think that every early stage company goes through this in some fashion where at first you're just trying to survive, right? So you're saying yes to everything.
Yeah. The Kickstarter stuff, right? You're saying,
exactly.
And then when you flip it, you're like, okay, yes, all revenue coming in, right?
Yeah. And some of this stuff predates me, but the stories are pretty interesting where, we had a lot of people who would come to us and we would just be pitching custom ideas to them. And it's really fascinating stuff, like what you're able to do with the technology. But obviously that's not scalable to build custom cameras for every single company.
It's seductive, isn't it? To fall into that because you're like, this is great. We can solve every problem, right? But it makes growth an opposite challenge. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. I mean, you're absolutely right. At the same time for us, it was good to get the foundation because we ultimately ended up, winning a handful of kind of evergreen clients who we aligned closely with. We, were able to build, a team around, and now we're at the stage where, we found this foundation. How do we take it from the next level? How do we scale up the company to where we have, we can really have a major impact on the world? And I would say, when I first came in, like my mindset was like, yes, let's find some niche areas, focus on those and, deliver a really quality product. Cause like outside of the hardware, even though the hardware itself, is really expansive, there's this whole level of software that needs to get built on top of it in order for us to really be successful. Cause, we're not at the stage where, we could just hand a computer vision AI enabled camera to a 3-year-old and they could figure it out. Right. You can do that with an iPhone. Everyone, you give a young kid an iPhone, they'll figure out what they want to do with it. But it still takes a level of engineering and precision. And we want to get to the place where we're able to do that, but to make it more accessible for people. But so for us right now, it is like going through the natural, tough growing pain of learning what to say no to and recognizing
it's the hardest thing in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, it's virtually impossible, especially, like, when you have a company who will come to you and they have a great brand name, like any early stage company would love to partner with them. But like, how does that fit into our overall strategy? And so, really what we're doing as an organization is narrowing in on like, what is our core focus? What are our core values? And how do we use those to drive the decisions that we make with the partners that we want to have? And, there's a number of ways that conversation is very, very difficult because what the company looked like 2 years ago is very different from what we want the company to look like in 2 years. And so
Absolutely.
are all the customers that helped get us here, are those the best customers for us in the future? Can we service them with the level that we want to and still be able to, hit that level
Innovate,
of growth that we want to?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. And so we're trying to narrow down to, I'll say, a handful of industries or less, ideally, where we can really focus on building the tools to make our product more accessible. And so there are some of those where we found some, really great like inroads to have, long-term, like good relationships with a number of companies across the vertical. And we want to focus on that, but we still don't want to alienate any of the other opportunities. So, one, for example, and again, this just goes back to the challenge of growth and how do you build your portfolio of clients to be able to do something for you today, do something for you, on in the future. So humanoid robots is a very, very interesting, discussion.
Right.
But quite frankly, even the leaders of that space are at best creating hundreds of those in a year. There might be an outlier here or there, but they're doing hundreds of those a year. That's not going to be an industry for us that today is going to do much of anything. Even if we were to dominate that industry, if we had 100%, saturation of that market, we still wouldn't be in a successful position as a company. But there's an instance where 5 years from now, right, there's billions of these robots that are getting created. And so
you don't want to miss that, right?
Totally. And it's, again, a really tough challenge to think how do we, focus on, what has gotten us from, 1 to 10. And now, if we go from 10 to 100 and then we go from 100 to 1,000, what are all of the individual elements of our company that need to be in place, of relationship with customers that need to be in place, right? Those steps are the natural growing pains that we're dealing with.
Amen. Totally. Yeah. Again, like I said, similar challenges. So totally understand it. It's not easy, but you have to have an eye towards today as well as an eye towards tomorrow, right? To make sure that you didn't misstep. Like you said, if there's billions of these robots, that should be something that you play phenomenally in, right? But today, right, it's not going to hit your revenue target. So you have to have that balance. And I totally get that.
Yeah. The way that I think about it is you need to have these intermittent steps, right? So there's things that we can do to get from where we are today to where we want to be in 2 years, right? And the work on those every single day, reassess those goals and values on a quarterly or semi-annual basis,
right?
And continually go through that process. And as you're going through it, naturally your horizon is going to change, or your view is going to change. All of a sudden we go from where we are today to where we, know that we'll be in 2 years. And then it's just a different view from there. And so we'll have to make different decisions.
Yeah. Good problems to have, right? It's just, it's got to be managed and forecasted.
Yeah. Exactly. Managed and forecasted. And again, it's just a change in overall, mindset for the company is, as I told you, we started out with, dealing with servicing hobbyists. Well, when all of a sudden you're servicing, Fortune 500 companies who have, very strict manufacturing requirements, there's just organizational change that you have to go through. And again, those growing pains, that's the fun part of it, actually.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So I always end up with a couple questions, and I told you one I was going to ask. What's something cool that Jim has done with AI or ChatGPT, that's other founders and C-level execs would find interesting?
Yeah. I struggled with this one because I tend to think that, anything that I'm doing seems like it should just be obviously used, or that's just a way that you should be implementing it. And
I will tell you, whatever it is, it's not.
Yeah. I mean, it's, when you think of the technology as really being prevalent for the last 2.5 years, right? Everybody's still trying to figure out, the right way,
to use it, implement it.
what, like, where I started, what I thought was like super valuable. And I'm building this story for you just so that you understand like the evolution of it, because the first one isn't so novel. It was just like simply using like, call recaps, for customers. And like I built a custom GPT that said like, here are the things that I want to know. What is the problem that they're having? Like, what is the, what are their forecasts? What are next steps? Like really, really simple stuff, right? Like, what you should be doing on any general call. But in talking about growth, like we really wanted to start to focus in on, what problems can we be facing? Can we be addressing for a large number of companies in specific industries that, basically find the commonalities amongst all of these things. And so we started to integrate a process where, basically we identify features and use cases for each one of the customers that, like is going to be using our camera. So there's certain like features that they would have, like a very simple like use case would be like facial recognition technology. And then there might be like, key point analysis that they're doing. There's other, like use cases, like those other features to that use case. But anyway, those two things are key because we can take those to build building blocks to put on top of our technology and make it easier for people to use. So
really cool.
Take all of that information and say, what should we be building as an organization that will help the most people? So train the GPT to identify the features and use cases within the vision technology and attribute that to what future expected demand is going to be based off of the information that we pull out of conversations. And so, we have an understanding of what the account value is going to be based on the projected units, tie that to the features and use cases, and basically can take a transcript or a series of calls, dump that in and get that information out to where we start to categorize, like these are the things that we want to be addressing in the product so that we're servicing the customers the best way that we possibly can and having like casting a wide enough net for those individuals.
Really, really cool. And the output, was it better than expected? Because there's probably some machinations you had to go through, right, to kind of refine it. But yeah, I mean, like better than expected, I guess. I tend not to look at information as that. Like, it's helpful just to have to have some data backing. Did
what
it surprise you,
into,
right? The accuracy of it, or like how close it to the market was, or off the market was.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we had a fairly good intuition. I would say it was it's been more accurate than I would have anticipated, but we're still working on it. Let's just say that it's nothing perfect, but it's a great way to take what is can easily become anecdotal and like having no data behind it, or it takes a lot of tabulation to do. And really, like this is the way that like any good company should be thinking about their products is like, how do I like build the features that are going to, service my customers? Because like, quite frankly, like what I think doesn't really matter, right? Like I like to think I have good ideas.
That industry think, right? And those customers think, right?
And that's my job, is to get that information from the customers so that our company can use it as effectively as we can.
Really, really cool. All right. So last question is, if I could give you a magic wand and you could hit your next 12-month rev goals, right? What would be the number one thing that you would wave the wand at and either fix or make happen?
It's probably focus for our revenue team, if I were to honestly say that.
That's exactly what I thought you would say. Because again, we struggle with the same thing, and that was really difficult. So
yeah. Because I think that we have everything that we need in our pipeline, but it's oftentimes, even with like great tools that we talked about before, it's difficult to identify the signal from the noise.
Yeah,
because there are a couple of different types of companies that we work with. It's like early stage innovative technologies who like they can all of a sudden explode and then have like a huge impact on us as being a really valuable customer, but it's impossible for us to predict. We couldn't even gather enough information around, the thousands of companies who are using our cameras to identify which one is going to be successful in a specific industry. And then we're also dealing with like large corporations who have R&D departments, and it's kind of the same thing where you don't know what's going to get approved. You don't know how long the cycle is going to take. And as much as good of a relationship as you can develop with those organizations, it's unpredictable because and so, but like if I take all of that, like, so the reason I mention all of that is it's really easy to look at each opportunity and say, hey, like this has tremendous value. Like we need to be servicing that customer, and we might be right, we might be wrong. But if we were able to like just identify the signal and say, hey, like let's focus on only these areas because we know that we are going to be we'll be able to deliver best in class within our product, for the specific industry. We'd be able to achieve those numbers, and probably tenfold. But, it's really, really difficult to identify that. Like, that's the challenge. If it were easy,
No
right,
doubt about
everyone
it.
would do it, as they say.
Right. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Jim, this has been a lot of fun and tremendous insights. And we can't wait to watch Luxonis grow and we'll have to have you back for some updates for sure. But for everybody watching this, and again, we'll have all the links below as we always do, but tell everybody how to get in touch with you guys at Luxonis.
Yeah. Really pretty simple. Luxonis.com. It's LUXONIS.com. There's a whole bunch of information around the variety of different use cases. It's pretty easy to pick up one of our cameras. They start at $100 up to about $1,000. So pretty easy for anyone as a hobbyist or an organization to get a hold of one and start doing some testing. We're a customer centric organization, so it's not too hard to find one of us or me. On a phone call, all you have to do is poke around the site a little bit and you can get the attention of a human.
Love it. Well, that wraps up this episode of Future Proofed. And as always, our whole motto is to educate the world and really founders and CEOs on how people are across various industries are using AI, data, and automation to make their companies better and basically the world better, right? Luxonis is a great example. So make sure you look up Jim and his team from this podcast. But until our next episode, we'll talk to you next time. Thanks, guys. Night.
If you're ready to embrace change and lead with innovation, be sure to subscribe and never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Future Proof Podcast.